I think if you look around the region and you see, for instance, in Moldova,
Yes.
the way the Russians have significant influence in the banking sector,
Yes.
indirectly in the media, in business in general, in the communities, of ethnic Russians, ethnic Ukrainians, and ethnic Turkic Gagauz.
Yes.
The Russians are applying a form of soft influence, soft being opposed to hard, hard being military, military. So I think this is the threat. This is the real Russian imperial practices in the 21st century are not about the Red Army. They're about, getting countries dependent on them by energy, selling them energy, buying up parts of their economy, and influencing public opinion.
It's basically the same tactic the KGB used.
I think the KGB was different. It was somewhat different because the KGB was fighting a Cold War with the United States, and was thus more interested in traditional intelligence activities. What I'm describing is beyond intelligence. It involves
Buying televisions or...
Yes, it's how do you influence public opinion?
Yes.
The KGB was interested in public opinion, but not to the degree that this new form of Russian empire is.
You think that Russia is doing this because it doesn't have the military power?
No, I think it's doing this because traditional forms of imperialism are just too expensive.
For it, yes.
Yeah,
So
the
it
Warsaw
can't afford
Pact
it.
did not work.
Yes.
It made the Soviet Union go bankrupt. So Vladimir Putin does not want to recreate the Warsaw Pact.
Because he can't.
Because he can't, and he also knows it will destroy Russia.
Yes.
What he wants instead is to have a traditional soft zone of influence and buffer states between Central Europe and Russia to the west, and between Russia and the Transcaucasus to the south.
But you called it Finlandization, like the...
Finlandization worked because it was not expensive for the Soviet Union, and it had and it made sure that Finland operated only within certain parameters.
They had free economy, they had free press, capitalism, but they didn't have
a free foreign policy.
Exactly.
I think it's more subtle than that. I think the Russians would like to create difficulties between Romania and Hungary. I think the Russians would like right-wing nationalist parties to do well throughout Europe, because it may sound ironic, but the European right supports Putin. Because Putin is very much a revanchist nationalist, like they are. So it would be a media strategy that supports right-wing nationalist parties that creates discord between Romania and Hungary, or Slovakia and Hungary, etc. I was saying that it's in Russia's interest to support conflict between Romania and Hungary, Hungary and Slovakia. In other words, to break up any webwork of bilateral relations between the countries themselves.
Yes.
In order to
divide and rule, or not divide and rule, but divide and have a soft zone of influence between Central Europe and Moscow.
What do you think is the weakest point we have in Romania? What's the
Weak
most
institutions.
vulnerable?
Weak institutions internally. Strong institutions are a defense against external subversion. Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore created strong institutions so a tiny city-state could defend itself against Malaysia and Indonesia. Same thing with Park Chung-hee in South Korea, created strong institutions and therefore stabilized South Korea. It's a matter of building strong impersonal institutions and the rule of law internally. The Russians don't like the rule of law. They like things murky, indistinct, so they can buy off politicians and do all of this. Romania has a big advantage. It is not as dependent on Russia for energy as Bulgaria, Hungary, Serbia, other countries. Romania has significant hydrocarbon stores of its own. I believe Romania is only dependent on Russia for 30% of its natural gas, whereas Bulgaria it's 90%. And there may be significant reserves of shale in Romania, as well as hydrocarbons offshore in the Black Sea and Romanian economic exclusion zone. So Romania is in a much better position than any other place in southeastern Europe against Russian influence. Let me lay this out in certain steps. First of all, during the Cold War, the Soviet Union did not have an economy. So it had no influence in Western Europe because nobody was doing business with it. But today's Russia has an economy. It's not just natural gas, it's a lot of other things too. It's a population of 150 million or so. So not only Germany, but other countries in Europe are deeply entwined in the Russian economy. So, that makes it very hard for Europe to enact strong sanctions, to be a major bulwark against Russia. I mean, you have a former chancellor, Gerhard Schroeder, who's essentially been bought and paid for by the Russians. And now, what President Obama has tried to do around the world, not just in Europe, but for years now, it's kind of the U.S. historically, during the Cold War and after, was a balancer. It balanced against China, it balanced against Russia, it balanced against Iran. What the Obama administration is trying to do is to get local countries in the regions to do the balancing themselves more, so that there's less burden on the United States. In other words, get the Saudis and the Israelis to balance against Iran. Get Japan and Vietnam to balance against China. And what he'd like to do is get Europe to balance against Russia. But there's a problem with that Europe cannot balance against Russia because Europe is compromised by its economic and energy ties with Russia. So that's the problem. It's very structural.